Welcome to But What About Me, a career success podcast dedicated to giving a voice to underrepresented populations, or UPs, and helping each navigate their career to reach their highest potential. This podcast is brought to you by JenniferTardy.com. Glad you are back for another episode of But What About Me? I'm your host, Jennifer Tardy, and today's guest is the incredible Gloria Chan. Speaking with Gloria was like talking to a long-time friend. Now, Gloria does a great job with helping professionals of color dissect, understand, and find their own power through work challenges that we feel are impacted by our identity. This episode dives deeply into Gloria's own self-concept, being raised by parents who are refugees coming from China, living and growing up in an underserved part of New York. Now, in this episode, Gloria discusses why it's important to make sure that your voice is heard and how to do that, establishing that you belong in the workplace, how to own your authority as a leader. We talk about how coaching can build your professional skills. We even go into why it's important to give yourself permission to be visible in the workplace. And one of my favorite parts is when we start talking about tensions around having authority and power and what you can learn from microaggressions. Now, Gloria is Senior Vice President of Coach Diversity Institute, or CDI, the world's only institution whose mission is to empower diverse communities through coaching. Through CDI's Coach Certification Program, Ms. Chan provides instruction, training, and mentorship to the next generation of diversity coaches and instructors. She is a professional certified coach, or PCC, credentialed by the ICF. Gloria is the founder of the Asian Pacific Islander Life Coaches Network and a noted expert in the Asian American community. Based in Washington, D.C., Ms. Chan is an award-winning author of Colorful Leadership: How Women of Color Transform Our World. Her clients have included senior leaders in organizations in government, corporate, nonprofit, foundations, journalism, and youth and education sectors. To learn more about Gloria and the Coach Diversity Institute, please visit CoachDiversity.com. Gloria's approach to making internal adjustments to external situations is guaranteed to make you feel in control of your life, so don't go anywhere. And you know what I'm going to say next. If you like what you are hearing or seeing, be sure to share this podcast with your friends on social media. Do a quick screen capture and post it on Instagram, and be sure to tag it to @YourCareerSuccess. All right, let's get it started. Well, all right. Well, we are here with another episode of But What About Me? And we have Gloria with us today. Hey, Gloria, how are you?
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. We are really excited to have you on the show today. And I know just from, and I mentioned to you earlier, from stalking all of your information, that you definitely have a passion for helping underrepresented populations and specifically people of color. I'd love to know more about where that passion for you came from.
So I think as all of us who care about this, it comes from a really personal place. It's the personal narrative that really drives us. And I love the theme of the podcast too. Like, what about me? Because a lot of times when people, are growing up on the margins or, minorities of some sort, it's their whole lives are spent saying, what about me? What about me? What about me? And I think that it's, I'm clearly an Asian American female. I was born in New York. My parents are immigrants. And so we always, there was always that difference between me and our classmates of like, something is, different there. I grew up in New York City, so there are a lot of people who are second generation, or a lot of people who are first generation. And I grew up in Starrett City, Brooklyn, so one of the largest federally funded housing projects in the U.S., incredibly diverse community. And but at the same time, was a lot of times the only Asian American voice, or one of a few, in some of the programs that I was a part of. So um, I just grew up feeling a lot of affiliation with people of color just because of the communities I came out of. And a lot of youth development programming at that time in New York City wasn't really yet focused on Asian Americans. So there was a lot of programming for people of color, and that largely meant African Americans, Latino, and maybe like me and my sister were like the Asian Americans in the group. So a lot of my teenage years was about that. Like, don't forget about us. What about me? What about me? In spaces of people of color. And then my education was a really interesting mix because I grew up, hanging out in, diverse communities in Brooklyn, Chinatown, New York City. So a lot of people, people don't think about that in terms of, there might not be similar access to resources. Like when people think about Asian Americans, they might think, super wealthy, crazy rich Asians, or like, doing well in school, or, they're doctors or lawyers and such. But a lot of the young people I grew up around, a lot of the options I saw was service in the military, joining the Marines. Some kids got in trouble, going to juvie or jails. And then there was another group that maybe had access to community college. So I was coming from that space, but at the same time exposed to really high privilege in terms of education. So my school, I went to private school starting in the 7th grade. So that was predominantly white space, even though my class was pretty diverse, because they were trying things out with diversity. But in any case, long story short is that in all of the communities that I was a part of, the Asian American voice was not really the predominant voice. It was either a space where other people of color dominated, or a space where it was majority white space.
So here's what's so interesting about what you said, almost like actually it gave me goosebumps, right? So I remembered seeing something, I was reading something that you were saying about underserved communities. Is it a good assumption to say that your passion is helping underserved communities within underrepresented populations?
Yes, so where that comes from is mainly my mom. So my mom and my dad were refugees coming from China. They didn't have anything when they first got here. So they were both working factory jobs. My mom was a garment factory worker. My dad was a noodle factory worker. He stayed there and became an executive in food manufacturing. But they both started off with like multiple jobs, like scraping their way by, going to school at nights, and really kind of, this working class mentality of like, you have to work really, really hard to get by. And after a few years, my mom was able to complete her education, and she finally became a journalist in a Chinatown newspaper. And she basically was like the fiercest reporter advocate that I've ever seen. She would cover, all the stories about health disparities, about, police interacting with immigrant communities. She would cover labor disputes in our local businesses, anything related to the kind of this underdog that had to always fight. I heard her covering those stories, all throughout the time that I was growing up in middle school and high school. So that's kind of where that drive comes from, to make sure that like low income voices were heard, refugee, immigrant voices were heard. And in the youth spaces that I was growing up in, it was making sure that the Asian American voices were heard, because we just weren't there at the table.
Okay. So as we start thinking about things like culture, gender, and race identity, how do you believe that affects the way we show up at work?
It's such a great question, and it's so loaded. It's so heavy, because the way that we see ourselves has been shaped like over the decades before we even hit the workplace, right? So like 2 decades or 3 decades in, you have been so conditioned to a certain way of how people view you, either as a woman, as an Asian American, as someone from an immigrant background. I remember even before stepping foot into the workplace, I was at Harvard Law School, and whenever there was any moment where I had a burning desire to raise my hand and say some kind of comment, advocating on behalf of low-income communities, or what about this race perspective, or what about this gender perspective, I felt so stupid because, one, like, why do I have to be the one to say these things? Mm-hmm. And two, I'm so scared to even like raise my hand. So I remember even being a law student at like one of the most prestigious universities, just like sweating every time I wanted to say something to represent the communities that I'm supposed to be representing, but feeling like I didn't belong there. Like, why is no one else saying this? I'm too scared to speak my voice. And kind of having been conditioned as an activist, or having been conditioned as an advocate.
You felt it to be a responsibility.
Yeah, and also it's like, if you're, from the time you're in high school all throughout college and, graduate studies, if you're always already conditioned as an advocate, you've already positioned yourself outside as someone who doesn't belong.
Yeah.
And this is me being able to articulate it like 30 some years in, but at the time I couldn't have seen that. So it's like, we've already positioned ourselves as not belonging. So the challenge is, how can we reposition ourselves as belonging from the get-go? So we don't even have to come from that space of nervousness or, being an outsider. I could have strengthened my voice and been much more powerful those years, in the classroom, to prepare myself for the workplace.
So we have to talk about this, because that is an amazing point that you just brought up, the repositioning yourself from the time that you walk in the door, right, to believing that you belong there, believing that you are a part of the inside and not just an outsider. Is that some of the work that you are doing now with leaders? And if so, how? How are you helping people to reposition themselves from the get-go?
Absolutely. It's the work of coaching. Mm-hmm. So I'm the Senior Vice President at Coach Diversity Institute. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I exclusively coached people working in social justice sectors, women of color, people trying to really reposition themselves as leaders in the workplace. So coaching is, like, in my mind, the tool to have to prepare yourself for the workplace and empower other people to do the same. I didn't see myself as belonging in the workplace I didn't realize this until this moment, until I got myself a coach. So all of those years on the Hill, I worked for the perfect office for me. I loved my managers. I loved my boss. They were all about inclusion. They were all about empowering us. And it was a majority minority office. So you felt like you belonged. But once we stepped outside of that office and we had to work, within Capitol Hill and other leadership offices and things, I could say that if I knew then what I knew now, I would have been much more confident and powerful in those spaces. And it wasn't until I actually got coached that I found that sense of power.
So, okay, and that makes sense because I hear a lot of people say the same thing as well too. That working with a coach can teach you things about your own blind spots, about your own mindset that you may not even known was like blocking your own success, right?
Yeah.
So, for those who are, so let's say there's a person that's listening to this right now, and she's like, "That's me." You know, Gloria's talking to me right now.
Mhm.
What are maybe one or two things that a coach would tell her or him to um, to reposition yourself before coming in? Just one or two things that you could potentially do.
Yeah. So I was, as I was preparing for this, I really wanted to be able to explain this well.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and the best that I could come up with was before I was thinking of like pre-coaching Gloria and comparing it to like post-coaching Gloria.
I like it.
And what I saw was before I experienced coaching, it was really easy for me to point to all the reasons why things were happening in my life and keeping it external. Oh, I've done that because, the environment is this way, or um, the world is unfair in this way, or we have no choice but to fight in this way. So I really gave away all my power without even knowing it, or like I complained about whatever it was, as I'm coaching, leaders, young and seasoned, there's a lot of complaint externally saying, "Oh, my employees are this way, they never listen," or "My bosses are this way, they never listen. The workplace is so hard to navigate. No one cares about what I'm saying." There's all of this external blaming,
Yeah.
and for lack of a better word, it's like, you see yourself as a victim.
I was going to ask that. The victim mentality, is that the same? Good.
Yeah. So post coaching, I know that whenever I feel that way, it's BS. Like now, as post coaching Gloria knows that I am the one in charge of my own sense of belonging. I am the only one in charge of my emotional state. I am the only one in charge to regulate boundaries and relationships. I'm the one who allows certain behaviors or doesn't allow certain behaviors. Post coaching Gloria is like way powerful. And even when she's not way powerful, and it's weird talking about myself in third person, even when I'm totally anxious and tight and mad, I get to own that experience and say, that is my experience right now, and no one else is making me anxious, mad, or crazed. I am doing it to myself.
You're choosing. And you know what? That response was powerful enough for tips 1, 2, and 3. It's really about, you know, what you just said, the whole removing the victim mindset. And if you remove it, you empower yourself to say, okay, well, here's what I can do. Here's what I can't. That was a really good one. So let me ask you then, so while at work, did you always identify with your Asian heritage, or did you feel a need to assimilate? So let's go back to Capitol Hill when you were there. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was never an assimilator because I didn't have to be. Like growing up in New York, it was so diverse.
Got it.
So I never had to, and I could hear different judgments. Like if I were an undergrad, if there were Asian kids who like had wanted to be white all their lives, like maybe I wouldn't have been the closest of friends with them just by different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But today, the way that I see it is everybody just grew up where they grew up, and everyone did the best with where they were.
Yeah.
Non-assimilators, assimilators, like no judgment. That's just how they survived. So for those of you who are out there listening, you are perfect exactly as you are. Your past is perfect. Your present is perfect. Now you get to choose however it is that you want to show up. Maybe before it was survival. Now let's figure out how you want to live the rest of your life by choice. And that's really what we do. You know, you asked me like, what would a coach do? What are the first three things that a coach would do? It's such a powerful skill set that it's really hard to say like, these are the 1, 2, 3 things.
Because it kind of goes with the person.
Yeah, because it depends on the person. It's all about how can you ask yourself the right questions? How can you start questioning things that you may fully believe or hold on to? How can you move forward and give yourself the space to be more creative or to feel more free?
Okay. You know, I do also want to talk about specifically Asian American leaders. So as you are coaching, do you see any patterns in what they experience in particular? Or do you find that the experiences while in corporate America are very situational?
Yeah, and I was trying to think of how to answer this question, because on the one hand, you like don't want to stereotype, right? But on the other hand, you do want to point out key patterns that come up.
Mhm.
I would say that it's fair. It's a fair assumption just based on data that I forget the exact amount, but something like 2/3 of Asian Americans are either first generation or second generation.
Okay.
So bridging cultural nuance is a big part of it. So for example, as an Asian American woman, I'm just going to speak from personal experience so I don't stereotype. I wasn't conditioned as a child to always speak up at the table, like as an equal person. You know, you in our families, you know, children are supposed to be obedient. Children are supposed to, for the most part, quiet. Um, you know, you weren't gonna find us like running around really loud in stores like ever. When I was a child, my mom's friend even asked my mom, like, are your kids mute? Because they're
Really?
not talking. And I remember like I hit this point where you know, I came back home from law school and all of a sudden they were expecting me to contribute to adult conversation.
Mm.
And I was like, what? Like, I've never contributed to adult conversation. So some of those nerves of speaking up, you know, also had to do with like, how was I conditioned to speak or not speak as a child in the home? So there's cultural differences. So much of workplace misunderstandings and frustrations happen because of our relationship with authority. So like how we interface with our parents. And that's going to be, so there's overall themes, you know, people of color relating with their parents. There's going to be all sorts of intergenerational nuances there. And there's going to be, you know, very specific ones for Asian Americans because parental authority, pleasing parental figures is a very big part of our culture. So, you know, that kind of redefining what authority means and how you interface with authority is one of the biggest challenges that I used to help, you know, people work through when I was doing one-on-one coaching. But now as we're training new coaches, that's what we're teaching our coaches to do. Like, how can you empower your clients to be able to move within different you know, sectors like your home life, your work life, and how can you be powerful in all spaces? So that's kind of, you know, a sneak peek into what we do at Coach Diversity.
No, and that is awesome. And I really want to just unpack the authority pleasing part that we were just talking about. So we were talking about people pleasing and our parents and then authorities and kind of seeing it differently. So what about the authority pleasing if in a leadership role too? Do you see any connections there or things that that must be navigated at that point? So now I'm in a leadership position, but that mindset from my environment growing up about authority and and pleasing our parents and doing exactly what we're supposed to do, how does that play out in if I am a leader?
Yeah, so I love that you asked the question because that's exactly right. It's like when you are the one being managed, that's a whole slew of issues. But when you are the one managing, it plays out through what some people call impostor syndrome,
Yeah.
or or even like tension around having authority, tension around having power, feeling um, like never really having had the experience of having authority and being okay with that as a positive experience. So
Mm.
so I've seen leaders who have authority but then give it all away. Well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And make it so
Oh.
fully democratic because they've never, had to really own up to that sense of authority and accountability before in spaces where they might need to. Um, or if it's a leader and there's a board, maybe they're so deferential to the board that they're not exhibiting and claiming vision or being powerful in their leadership position. So it's interesting. It's like how used to you to having authority and to having power, and two, do you have an internal judgment that that's a bad thing?
Someone needs to write about that, Gloria, because that is a really big thing. So being in leadership, because it must affect. And you said it right. It's cultural nuances because you can think about it affecting women. You can think about it affecting people of color in general. That now that you do have power and authority, if you don't own it, or if you take the democratic approach and you want everyone to be happy, and so you wait for the consensus solution, yeah, people experience that all the time. And then it connects to the imposter syndrome. So if someone's listening to this and someone's like, oh my goodness, I'm in that situation, like that's me. Any quick tips for them? I know it's not a quick solution because anything mindset wise isn't a quick fix, but any tips for them?
Yeah, this is like a lifetime of work.
Mm-hmm.
The tip
Mm-hmm.
is to get started. Um, Call a coach, find a coach, find a
I love
coach.
it.
It's like that's what I would do if I felt I were stuck at this moment. Um, and there's no shame in getting help. There are people in the world like Jennifer, like the coaches that we train, like, the experts at Coach Diversity Institute who can help you navigate your own internal terrain so that you can stand powerfully externally. And what I would like to say is that, yes, I was personally exposed to coaching first by being coached, but I've got to say, going through coach certification programs is one of the most powerful, personally transformative experiences that I've ever been through. And I know that students coming through Coach Diversity say the same thing, that I thought I was signing up to get some coaching skills under my toolkit. But what you get out of it is you are a fully empowered, or at least you know how to become a fully empowered person and how to lead from that space of power and help other people feel the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Going through a certification, going through it's almost like you have to go through your own transformation so that you can understand what your clients are going to experience as they're going through their transformation as well too.
Absolutely. And I would say too that, my business partner, Dr. Tawana Burrows, always says coaching is a skill set, is not a profession. What
Mm-hmm.
she means by that is, you don't have to want to become a coach or a professional coach to go through certification. coaching skills are the next generation of management tools. You'll see this. You'll see a lot of people doing this, from McKinsey to the LinkedIn's to all of the big companies. We're really pushing the frontiers of what a powerful manager is and what powerful leaders are. It's going to be those people who are so clear within themselves, who can be powerful and also be able to motivate and engage their team members. And that's what coaching skills are all about. How to keep an open mindset, how to ask the right questions, how to listen deeply, how to be able to empathize, how to be able to, help your people be solutions focused. So all of those are like real professional skills, not just for coaches.
I like that. Got it. So let's talk about people who may feel invisible in the workplace. How can people who may feel invisible in the workplace transition to feeling personally and professionally empowered?
So this is my gut reaction to that, is if you're feeling invisible in the workplace, you're probably invisible to yourself.
Oh, we have to unpack that one.
Yeah. If you're feeling invisible in the workplace, you're probably invisible to yourself. And what I mean by that is it's pretty likely that you have not invested the time and energy to giving yourself space to be who you are. You're likely waiting for permission for other people to validate you and have space and create space for you. But no one can do that for you but yourself. Mm. So and the strangest thing is that your personal life and your professional life are deeply tied. So if you can create space for yourself in your own life, hobbies, have some fun, get some creativity and innovation happening on the side, that will spark you for the professional space. In the professional space, how can you start to give yourself permission to be more visible? How can you start giving yourself permission to pitch your ideas, to connect with influencers, to get a mentor, get a sponsor? All of those things are things that only you can do for yourself. Even if you met the most powerful person in your company, but you felt invisible, that connection will do nothing for you unless you've done all the work to make yourself visible to yourself or worthy of visibility to yourself.
So it sounds like the lesson here is do not wait for someone to see you. You have a responsibility to show yourself to them, or just to show yourself in general.
Yeah, and it's also like know that
That's very empowering.
Know that you're worthy of being seen. Like, when you look in the mirror, are you happy with what you see?
So let's connect people finding their purpose and passion. How does that connect to a job, a career path?
It's everything. It's everything. I mean, if we just to connect it with visibility, right? If you know your purpose and passion, who cares who sees it, right? You are just doing your thing and people will see it because you're not caring whether they see it. You're in tune with your purpose and passion. So I know, especially coming from Asian American communities, we like to please our parents. We like the anti-risk taking is safe because we know that we'll be approved, right? And so a lot of times when I have coached folks one-on-one in the past, what's your purpose? What's your passion? That's a scary question because it might be singing. It might be being a photographer. It might be something that is completely unrelated to their professional path. I won't tell you what to do, but I'll just share my own story. When I became clear that I was going to 100% commit to my own happiness professionally and in my life, I said, fine, if you want me to commit 100%, I was having an internal dialogue. Gloria.
Those are necessary.
I was like, Gloria, if you want this life, I will give it to you, right? And so I had a 7-year track record on the Hill and in political arenas in the Asian American Pacific Islander community. I was going to give it all up to become a music manager.
Okay.
I was going to give it up. I redid my resume. I put all the artsy volunteer stuff on the top. And I rewrote my summary. I want to be a music manager and, transfer all of these skills into music. And I even submitted that resume to music management companies. That happened, like, not even lying.
Okay. Awesome.
And what happened was I was getting coached, ding, 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 coaching, right? Mm-hmm. I was getting coached, and I said to my coach, landing gigs for musicians is just as political as what I'm trying to steer away from. LA, there's lots of egos, people are, all these things. So she asked me, like, Gloria, why were you attracted to music management in the first place? And I said, I love, like, live music. There's something transformative about it. You're fully embodied. You've got a message. You're inspiring your audience. So I was like, I want to inspire artists to find their passion, their purpose, get up the courage to be who they are, and influence their audiences in a way that can transform our world. And she asked me, she was like, Gloria, are you telling me that you want to be a coach? I nearly died. I nearly died that day. I could not sleep that night, Jennifer. I was like dreaming. I'll tell you what I was dreaming about. I dreamt about, I was like night dreaming without sleeping. I was so excited that, I would be speaking on panels about diversity and inclusion and coaching. And by the time this airs, Coach Diversity will have already had our first annual symposium on coaching and diversity.
That is so awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
You dreamed it, and now you're going to be doing that soon.
And if I had never dove in to become a music manager, I would not be sitting here right now doing the work that I love and that I'm completely passionate about.
That is awesome. And because for some reason, when you think about, there are a lot of people who believe that in order to have your passion and your purpose, you can't do it in a traditional career path either. You have to do it you have to make a radical shift the way that you did before, going from Capitol Hill to music. But you can still find passion and purpose and still have a traditional career path. Not everyone has to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone has to be 100% artist. You can do it in so many other ways. That was a great example. And thank you for sharing that story of yours as well, too. We talk about coaching a lot, and I could always talk about coaching. But one of the things that I do want to talk about is self-coaching, because I've heard you mention, I said, hey, Gloria, or, when you mentioned talk to yourself. Talk to me a little bit about this whole notion of self-coaching and how it can work for people.
I talk to myself all the time.
So do I. It's okay.
So, and these are kind of little tools that I'm just going to touch upon, but this is what we dig deep into in our coach certification programs. So just one example could be like, if I'm feeling a lot of emotion around a topic, I will kind of just explore, what's really bothering me about this? How am I seeing it in a way that is making me feel constricted? And how can I see this in another way? And really digging deep and like, what do I really want out of this situation, out of this relationship, out of whatever context it is? And how can I create more of that? So for example, if there's a conflict, what I really want is greater understanding. So how can I be the change, right? How can I insert understanding into that relationship from my point of view and not wait for it to be inserted by someone else? How can I create what it is that I want? Okay. And sometimes that creation might be leaving. It might be destruction. It might be, let me leave this and let me create it over here.
Yeah, on a bigger scale. So even self-coaching and microaggressions, because it sounded like, that could have easily been put into the scenario that you just gave, but there are microaggressions that we deal with constantly in the workplace, even outside of the workplace. Um, can you give me a self-coaching example that will help to combat when you experience microaggressions?
Yeah, and I'm formulating my answer.
Absolutely.
Um, if if something gets to you, if a button is being pushed, if some emotional button is being pushed within you, no one can release that emotional response but you.
Mm. I love that. And I need to say something that someone said to me one day that was knock your socks off moment for me that connects to what you just said. I was sitting in a seminar and the facilitator said, um, anything that triggers you or that triggers an emotion with you only does so because there is a place, because it's touching a place of self-doubt within you. And I had to think about that for a moment. And I was like, whoa, anytime you get triggered, it's because there's a place within you of self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So repeat again what you said too, and then let's keep talking about that.
What did I say? I said if something is emotionally triggered within you,
Mm-hmm.
you're the only one who can release that. You're the only one who can work on releasing that concentration. If you're walking around the world and you're triggered like every day, that's a really hard way to live, right? It's a really hard way to live, and no one else can free you from that but you. You may not have created the circumstances around you. This is how we teach how to handle microaggressions at at Coach Diversity. It's like there can be a million things happening around you and shaping your identity. The moment you decide to take charge of your own experience, everything changes.
Mm.
I have this, I think it was a Lyft driver, a cab driver, who started up a conversation about like a time when he was in Korea
Mm-hmm.
and like dating Korean women and how, they're much more, I don't know, pleasing or submissive or something. It was something that could have been gone really south and weird. Like if if I were triggered
really quickly,
it could have gone really bad. Like if it were, someone else. But I was in a space where I wasn't triggered by that. It's like, this is so interesting. Let me go deeper. So I started listening to him really deeply, not with racial ears, but with human ears. And I just witnessed a man in his like 60s or 70s who was really lonely.
Mm.
His wife had just passed like 15 years ago. He had never dated again. And that's what it was. He had never dated again. And his friend told him, you should go to Asia and meet someone. So I just witnessed incredible loneliness in another human being, as opposed, and I think I even gave him a hug, like on the way out. So in a situation where it could have gone really bad, there was actually a moment of connection because I worked out that trigger.
Yeah. So in a moment where you could have easily disconnected and people would have said, "Oh, I get why you disconnected," you decided to let's go a level deeper. This could be a great place of connection. I think more people should be able to, yes, yeah, that is an opportunity for a lot of people. Even going back to something that you said a second ago that I really hope resonates with a lot of people who listen to this. If you are triggered all day long, everywhere you go, that is something that person should reflect on. If you're constantly triggered, okay.
If you want. if they won't, right? Because that's the key, Jennifer. Like, we can't, it's not wrong. We can't make people wrong for it, because that's hard. Like, all we get to do is show another option. And if you want this option, come on and get it. If you don't want the option and you like, that's really a twisted way to say it, but if you kind of like pointing out things that are terrible, like, who am I to tell you that that's wrong?
Yeah. But just understand that you're making these decisions. It's not happening to you. You're making.
It's by choice now. Now you get to live your life by choice.
So, Gloria, I could talk to you for another few hours. I think in another life we were like besties or something. But I do want to take an opportunity just to ask you, tell people who are listening about, what's happening in your world. What are some upcoming events? Where can people find you and Coach Diversity online? Can you tell people?
Yes. So you can find us at coachdiversity.com. And if you're interested in learning about coaching skills, come through our coach training programs. There are lots of options to dip your toe in for one weekend and see if it's for you. Our full certification is over the course of 5 months. For those of you who really want to dig into those skills, for self-transformation or helping others do the same. So we really welcome you explore our offerings at coachdiversity.com. And it's the same for social media. Our handle is Coach Diversity.
Perfect. So I'm going to do with you the same thing that we do with all of our other guests. And I do some flash questions, 3 flash questions. So I'm going to ask the question. I need you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind, okay? Okay. First question. It's never too late to
love your mother.
That was a good one.
I love you, Mom.
Okay. So question number 2, I get inspired by.
I was going to say people who sing.
Awesome. And the last question, career success means?
Fulfillment.
That's so great. And that's a great way to end the show. So Gloria, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I love what you're doing for people, and especially people of color in leadership positions. Keep up the great work. And we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Be sure to tune in next week because we have so much more in store for you. Until next time, keep going, keep growing, and keep glowing.